On to our next speaker. We've got Melissa Biggs Bradley from Indagare. Is that how you pronounce it? Indagare. In 2007, Melissa founded the luxury travel company Indagare to provide its members with rich editorial content and the services of a boutique in-house travel agency. The company reflects Bradley's passion for travel in the beautiful guides it publishes and expert travel advice on destinations ranging from Paris to Bhutan. Indagare, which means to discover in Latin, elegantly bridges the gap between travel magazine and travel agency, providing an easy-to-use digital platform as well as expert personal recommendations. So Melissa was previously an editor of Town & Country, and in 2003 she launched Town & Country Travel Magazine, and it was 3 years later nominated for an award, the National Magazine Award for General Excellence by the American Society of Magazine Editors. Must have been a very proud moment. And she regularly comes to speak at events. She's been interviewed by a series of magazines. And some years back, she received a BA from Yale and her master's degree from Columbia University. I mean, I love all the universities coming together in this room. Amazing. And when she's not traveling, she lives with her family in New York. And as a mother and a parent who's personally passionate about traveling, both my husband and I are both personally passionate about traveling with our children. I can identify with your passion, and it's amazing that you've allowed that passion to create your business. And may I invite Melissa Biggs Bradley up to stage to talk about Indagare. A round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I consider myself an accidental entrepreneur. I would say the journey to get where I am in my career and pretty much every place else that I've gotten in my life has had a large accidental component. So today, as Chitra said, I run Indagare, which is an online travel company that features robust content, so people can use our articles and our archives to research their trips, as well as a boutique travel agency, so they can work with our specialists to work on custom trips for anything from a weekend to a safari or a year-long family sabbatical. And I love what I do. One of the reasons that I do is because I passionately believe that travel, when planned properly, can truly change people's lives for the better. So our members use our publications, they use our website and the expertise of our specialists to plan incredible journeys around the world. And that means that part of my job every day is hearing from travelers who are returning from trips that have literally changed their lives and that stand out as memories for their families that will be among the most important memories that they share together. And this isn't an exaggeration. A couple months ago, one of our members sadly died after a long illness, and her family sent us an email and they said, "Thank you so much for helping to create these lovely vacations for her. Time away with her family was so important to her. You made her life better. You gave her happiness." So when I say to my team, what we do every day is really important and it matters, I'm not exaggerating. Obviously, we're not saving lives, but I think what we do is create the highlights in people's lives. So, as I said, how I got here was an accident. I had always wanted to have a career. I knew when I was about 16 years old that I wanted to be a journalist, and after university, I wound up getting a job as the travel editor for a glossy publication in the US called Town & Country, and went on to start their travel magazine. And that was an incredible job as well. I got to interview Sir Richard Branson on his private Virgin Island. I got to travel around Paris with Michael Kors looking for design inspiration. I got to meet Maharajas in India. I got to eat in the kitchen with Alan Ducasse at his 3-star Michelin restaurants. It was pretty great. And a couple years into it, I got married and I had my first child. And that was also part of the plan. Family and a career were never a question for me. But about 8.5 months after my daughter was born, my boss called me into her office and she said, "There's a trip that I want you to cover." And she had said that many times in the past 5 years, and my response had always been the same. Great, tell me where it is, when am I going, I'll pack my bags. But this trip was different. It was a 3-week-long trip. I would be traveling with trustees of some museums in the States, with their curators, on a reconfigured 767, so it was all business class seats. And we were going to go around the world to 10 lost cities. So we were leaving from London and we were going to go to Oman and Jordan and India and Laos and Nepal and Tibet and China and Cambodia and Uzbekistan and Mongolia. And I took the itinerary home that night and I showed it to my husband, and I hoped that he was going to say, "No, you can't go on this trip." But he looked at the itinerary, and the only time he's ever said this in my 20 years or more of being a travel journalist, he said, "Wow, I actually want to go on this trip." But he said, "You have to do this. This is truly the trip of a lifetime." And so I spoke to our pediatrician, and I spoke to a child psychologist, and I spoke to my toughest critics, my mother and my 3 sisters. And all of them said, actually, because of the age of the baby, she will have passed these really important attachment milestones, and she's not yet at the age where she can understand the passage of time. So there's actually this window where you could go and it wouldn't negatively impact her development. And I thought, okay, is my husband testing me? I thought, is my boss testing me? And I had to realize, in some ways, was I testing myself about my own commitment to having a career and a family? But I went on the trip, and the photographer who accompanied me was a mother as well, and she had a daughter about the same age as mine that she had to leave behind. So as personal and as isolating as my predicament felt, I realized I was not alone in it. In fact, every single parent at some point is tortured by leaving their children for different reasons and for different time periods, but it's something that we all go through. And on that trip, I saw for the first time Angkor Wat and Petra and the Taj Mahal, and many of the things that I learned and were new to me were actually not in those monuments or in the memorials, but they were within myself. And in many ways, while I was looking at the beauty and the buildings, what I was discovering was things about myself and what I wanted to become, and how complicated that was going to be. So in some ways, it was like the negative of a photograph where there were 2 realities happening at once. There was the world that I was being exposed to and another one that I was absent from. So of all the experiences that I had on that trip, whether it was walking on the Great Wall of China for the first time or riding on elephants in Nepal to track tigers, there was a hollowness in the experience at the same time. Wounded soldiers talk about phantom limbs, and in some ways I felt like this whole dimension of myself, who I had wanted to become and who I was as a mother, had not even gotten on that plane. And every child that I saw on that trip represented a moment that I missed or that I could miss. And so I've always believed that travel is not just about where you go, but it's how the journey shapes you. And while I wanted to become a mother, I also wanted to have a career that was going to be full of independence and exploration. And that trip was in many ways a radical manifestation of the tension between those 2 things. And the fact that there was always going to be a predicament between having those 2 things happen. There was a trade-off that I had not anticipated. So in many ways, obviously I learned a lot about the lost cities and the civilizations that we visited, but I also had to navigate learning about lost identity and lost certainty, which up until that point, I think in many ways, I was certain that I could have those two things without a trade-off. So obviously since then, I have traveled a ton with my daughter. I actually have 2 children. One of the first trips that I took her on as a toddler was to Paris, and I was so excited to go to Paris because I'd lived there in college and I knew it inside and out. But as you know, when you're traveling with a child in a stroller, you learn a different side to the city. I was certainly not going shopping, and I was not lingering in cafes on the left bank or loitering in museums. I was going to parks and figuring out the very best carousels and the best trampolines and the cleanest toilets and where to buy crepes. And since then, with both of my kids, I've figured that a lot of the places that you go, that I've gone, that I know and I love, may be familiar, but I always become a different person in them when I'm traveling with my children. And of course, I always have a plan or a strategy when I'm traveling with my children. And invariably, that travel plan gets thrown a surprise or a twist, either by them or by somebody else or by fate. One of the trips I took my daughter on when I was writing a story as a journalist, I brought her to Belize, and she was 6, and we were on our way home, and there was a long flight delay, and so we were stuck at this tiny airport during lunch, and of course, being the protective mother, I went to the newsstand, such as it was, and I tried to find hermetically sealed food from, foreign germs, like Pringles and chips and granola bars. And my daughter looked at me and she said, "Well, Mommy, why aren't we going over there?" And she pointed to a dilapidated food truck that had locals lining up for rice and beans. And I thought, okay, she's busted me. I am not walking my talk. I say that we travel to immerse ourselves in other ways of living and see other countries and learn new ways of culture. And here I am resorting to the packaged foods. So she had become, at 6, the fearless explorer and the trustworthy guide, and I said, okay. And we went over and we ate rice and beans. And when I left the safety of the magazine world, I also had a plan. I had decided, I had a business plan, I mapped it out, and I had decided that I was going to run a digital magazine. It would be subscription-based, and people would use our articles and our archives to research trips, and we would have a vetted community, sort of like a TripAdvisor, but a more trusted one where they would trade information. And that's how we started, and those elements still exist today. But a few months after launching, people started calling us up and they said, "Well, can you help me plan my trip? This information's great, but I really need somebody to actually put my trip together." And I was a journalist. I had never been in the service business. I didn't know how travel agencies worked, but I was a consummate researcher, so I said, okay, I'm sure I can find you somebody. And what I found was that the type of travel agent that these people were looking for, somebody who was really expert in the destination but would also get to know them, had been put out of business. These small boutique agencies had been swallowed up by big corporate agencies, or they'd been killed off by airlines not paying commissions and the online travel agencies providing direct options for people. And so I knew, having covered the travel world for more than a decade and planning trips for myself and friends, that we could help these people. So the first year, we didn't advertise that we were doing this. If you were desperate enough that you called and begged, we would help you figure out your trip. But what happened in doing that is we discovered that there was something magical that really became the magic ingredient to our business, which is that once we were actually working on people's individual personalized trips and they had connected with someone in my office, they were coming back to us and sharing their own tips and their discoveries. So they were saying, when they came back from Berlin, gee, there's a guide that I had that was incredible through a friend. And all of a sudden, we started having this network effect where we were pooling information so that every trip that we've planned for a family to go to Rome was improved upon by the next family's trip to Rome, and so on and so on. And so the information built, our data built, and our community built, because people who had great trips would refer their friends. So it ignited this incredible organic growth, and it also added a revenue stream because we got commissions from hotels for bringing them clients. So none of this was my original plan. I had thought I'll have a couple of journalists and some freelancers. Today we have more than 65 people in our office in New York and contributors around the world. And what we've really done is reinvent what a travel agency looks like in the United States, because the people who we employ, none of them were trained as travel agents. They come from the worlds of food and fashion and the arts. They're all passionate travelers. They don't sit behind desks all day long. Most of them don't know how to use the GDS or Sabre. They go out and they travel and they scout places and they connect with clients on a very personal level. In an age where most people are doing travel transactions online and not even knowing if there's a person you can call if you have a trouble, our clients are talking to people that they know by name, who have gotten to know their families. They know everything about their children's likes and dislikes. Often cases they plan out a 5 or 10 year sort of curriculum of what their travel is going to look like if they want to educate their family over a certain amount of time. And none of this was in my original plan. But I think that because I had traveled so much from an early age, I was really open to the organic and the lessons in the accidental. And I believe that when one travels, you have to stretch your perspective as you learn about new cultures. And stretching your perspective not only can be successful for your business, but I think it can make you have a happier and more fulfilling life on a day-to-day basis. There's a psychologist at Stanford University named Carol Dweck who has come up with a philosophy about mindsets, which I think is really interesting. She noticed that there were certain children in classrooms, I think they were around 5 years old, and there would be sort of two groups in a classroom. There were those children who felt that their intelligence or their talents were fixed, and you'd present them with problems, and at a certain point they would just stop trying. And then another segment of the kids seemed to believe that their talent or their intelligence could grow and develop. And she called that the growth mindset. And those kids would take on new challenges and try new adventures and keep working at difficult problems because they seemed to believe that they could grow their intelligence. I think that the growth mindset and the travel mindset are really one and the same thing, because they're both about resilience and adaptability and an openness to trying new things. So I started Indagare with the belief that travel can transform your life and the world one transformative trip at a time. And I thought that if I could put people together who would share their destination knowledge, we could create something that would allow more people to have better trips. And the better the trips they had, the broader their perspective would be. And the broader their perspective would be, the happier their lives would be. I also know that when you travel and you meet people from different cultures and countries and backgrounds, it expands your humanity. Mark Twain said, travel is fatal to prejudice and bigotry and narrow-mindedness. And broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and of things can only be acquired if one is not vegetating in one little corner of the earth one's whole life. So our central purpose really is to inspire people to get out and to see the varied world and the beauty in it and the changes in it. And never more than today do I think it is essential for people to use travel to grow their mindset and to become people who are world global citizens. My daughter is 18 now, and I have tried to take her to experience the world, both in our neighborhood and in many other places. I've actually brought her back. Last year I brought her to Angkor Wat, which I had seen for the first time on that jet trip. And it's certainly that there was a poignancy of a deja vu from having been there without her before. But really the reason that I've brought her to travel with me is because I want her to embrace an attitude of resilience and an openness to the accidents in life. Because while I think you have to have a plan for your family trip, for your business, and for your life, I think it's actually more important to be open to the accidents that happen along the way than to follow the plan. At least in my life, I have found that many of the best lessons to learn and the most delightful moments or joyous moments that I have been in those accidents. So, thank you.
What an amazing speech, Melissa. You know, inspiring, and you know, I can relate so much to what you were saying about you know, your children not being there when you're seeing amazing things on your trips. And everyone says, oh, it's great to go away with children. Yeah, it's great for one night, you know, when you've had a bit of time to read The Economist or a magazine or a newspaper. And I say The Economist because somehow, whenever I pick up The Economist, my children never used to let me continue. It was, you know, the magazine. But after that, you're thinking, oh, wouldn't they love this? And oh, I wish I could show them that. And I so relate to that. And you know, also about building up your company. The fact that you took on experts in different fields instead of the traditional, you know, travel agency employee, big lesson. And you know, I always say hire for skill, not for hire for attitude, not for skill. And just because someone has worked in another industry doesn't mean they're not going to be good in hotels. And we have several examples of that. I'm very proud to say in our hotel, in our hotels too. Right, we actually have a bit of time for questions in this case. So Melissa, would you like to come back up, and let's give the opportunity, and someone please ask a question. I've brought her back up to stage.
Yes.
So what is the name the company come from?
Well, as Chitra said, in Latin or in Italian, it means to discover, seek out, or seek out, explore. And it's not, to be honest with you, I wanted a name that meant something. I didn't like nonsense names, and there's all sorts of rules in terms of the internet that it should be short and it should have a vowel, it should really begin with the letter A. But even back in 2007 when I bought the name, Indagare actually existed. We had to buy it from somebody who was sitting on the name. So it was really the idea that it would be something that was meaningful, that related to travel, that was short and would work online. But it works perfectly with what we do.
Portuguese word, indagare.
Oh, you use it in Portugal too? Okay, yeah.
So
yeah.
it means?
Indagare means to question something.
Ah,
yeah.
I just learned a new Portuguese word, and Latin too.
I knew they still used it in Italian, but yeah.
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 Indagare.
Yes.
For the travel agency portion of your business, do you find, for the travel agency portion of your business, do you find more parents with children or grandparents with generations coming to you to help with trip planning?
Well, I think in some ways because we started organically, and when I founded the company, my daughter was 10 and my son was 8. And we were doing a lot of the kinds of travel that I was doing. We obviously attracted a lot of families. But we now have sort of a range of everything. I mean, we really do. It's probably people 35 to 65 years old. 80% of our clients are in the States, 10% in Europe, and 10% the rest of the world. But yes, I think, you know, a specialty will always be multi-generational and family trips, because there are very few people who are specializing that in the States. Yeah.
What's a great holiday for a 2- and a 4-year-old?
Great is different to what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah. I have a couple rules of thumb with kids. One of them is, I've always said, you know, in the U.S., obviously people want to travel really far, and that's the same thing in Europe. I do think there's something to be said in the same way that we say in the States, have as many children at your kids' birthday parties as they are a year old. not many people follow that, but that was words of wisdom. I feel a little bit the same way in terms of flight time. You shouldn't really fly longer than the kids are aged. So if you can fly within 2 to 4 hours and not deal with a lot of jet lag, I would suggest that. And again, it's finding things that are going to make them happy and make them comfortable. So certainly coming here, you've got a lot of the built-in facilities and the weather and lots for them to do, but also for you to be happy. But yeah, I definitely, when my kids were that age, we did a lot of beach holidays because they weren't going to get as much out of foreign places and sightseeing. And then, probably by the time they were 6, 7, 8, we started exposing them to places like Venice and London and, places that were obviously different that they could learn.
And it's the oldest child that dictates
Yes.
a little bit, because the youngest just kind of travels along, in the end. But no, it's
Exactly.
a great question.
Yeah.
Hi. I think you grew a customer in all of us.
Well,
At least
actually-
I was very interested in
And you are supposed to, in the goodie bag, you're supposed to have certificates. So we will get you them all before we leave.
I was wondering if there is a profiling about your clients, as was asked before. Would you say that you have also younger people who would like to explore with their children at the earlier stage of their lives, like getting inspiration, also education for the children, and some like growing down, as Paul mentioned. So, do you think you also have do you also have those clients, or you think you're more catering to the more business type, more accomplished career families?
You know what, I've always said my perspective on travel is probably what the kinds of people that we attract are people who have similar perspective, because our tone is very clear through the website. And I've always felt that the kind of travel that I want to cover is those experiences that open you up to the world. And it doesn't have to do with money, and it doesn't have to do with background so much as, are you really interested in an authentic experience that is different from what you can have at home, where you're going to meet local people, where you're going to have local foods, where you're going to be surprised by the discovery of the place. And so I think, to me, that's the most important element that comes through, and the common denominator with our clients. And so part of that is we do attract a lot of people who use their travel to educate their children, and use their travel in many ways to telegraph their values. So when they go on holiday, they want them to learn, they want them to try different foods, they want them to appreciate local culture, and a lot of the times they want to give back. Whether they're going to India or to New Orleans, they want to be aware of not just the beautiful hotel or the interesting sights, but what are the complexities of that destination, and how do you as a responsible person get involved in that, and can you show your children the complexities, and can you, I took my children to India a couple years ago, and one of the things that we did was in Delhi, there's an incredible nonprofit that was started by that wonderful filmmaker, I can't think of her name right now, Maya Neer, I think it is. And it's for runaway kids, because there are tons of kids from all over India who jump on trains and end up in Delhi and think they're going to be Bollywood stars, and they end up on the street, and a lot of them get taken advantage of and get addicted to drugs. And she started this incredible nonprofit where she takes them in and educates them. And we spent a day there, and yes, we saw lots of sights, and we went to Gandhi's house and visited the Taj Mahal, but for me to go to India and not have my children understand the complexities of the problems of that country would have been a miss. And I think a lot of our clients feel the same way. So,
Thank you.
I hope that answers.
One more question. Up here, Rosa, I think this lady put her hand up. Oh, Nuno.
I'm curious to know how involved the trips are that you're planning for people. So, I mean, are you sending them to a hotel, or are you creating an entire experience, including the meals, including the interaction with locals? And what is your reliance on local tour operators, or how do you develop that relationship and that trust? Because you can't control everything from New York.
Good question. Again, because I want to do everything for everybody, we work the way our clients want. So some of them will just book a hotel, Some of them will come to us and say, I mean, we really have done many year-long family sabbaticals, which could be involved just picking the hotels, or it can be literally every hour of their day what they want, having, in terms of restaurants, guides, activities, spa treatments. We customize it based on the client. And so, yes, we do work with a lot of tour operators, and a big part of why my team's traveling so often is we're going to destinations and trying to figure out what are the best operators for us. And because we've got this wide range of clients, we can't always use the same operator. So we usually have a range. So for someone who's flying in on a private plane and wants limos and certain kind of hand-holding throughout, that's a different operator than the family that really knows what hotels they want and they just want a special activity one afternoon. And we want to be able to work with partners everywhere. And I'll be honest, there's certain countries where we have it nailed and we have incredible partners that fill the range for all of our clients. And there are other countries where that just doesn't exist, and we're very honest with our clients and we'll say, sorry, but that infrastructure isn't there yet, and we can give you the best that we can through our local partners, but you're not going to have the same caliber of guide. I mean, we can have art historians taking clients through museums throughout Europe, and archaeologists and incredible specialists, focused on food or wine. And some, South American or Asian countries where, like Myanmar, which is an incredible country, but they're just developing their tourism infrastructure. You don't have that, a lot of the guides don't even speak English perfectly. So you have to set expectations, and I think that's a big part of what we do is, to what Paul was saying, you've got to be completely transparent. And so a big part of what we do is say, this is where we can deliver this, and in these countries, this is what we can deliver. Thanks.
Thank you so much,
You're so
Melissa.
welcome.
Hug. Thank you.